The Black Korean heritage, the wrong text she texted, he's hurting me, to the wrong number, the Korean mafia boss replied. 5 minutes. Chapter 1. The accidental signal. Each sentence should feel like a careful step. Angela's fingers found the phone on the bathroom tile. The screen was cracked at one corner, had been for a month, from a different night, a different wall, and the light it threw was cold and clean and the only light she had. She meant to text her sister. Deja was the third contact down in her recents, always there, the way Deja had always been there. Solid, no questions, the person who came at 2 a.m. without being asked twice and left only when Angela was sure she was safe. 3 taps. That was all it required. She had done it before. She knew the distance between her thumb and her sister's name. She typed fast. She typed with the particular speed of someone whose hands know what the brain is only beginning to catch up to. Desperation doesn't pause to proofread. Desperation doesn't double-check the contact name glowing at the top of the screen. Desperation just sends. He's HURTING me. Please. 11:43 p.m. She hit send, exhaled through her teeth, pressed her back against the cold curve of the bathtub and pulled her knees up to her chest and watched the strip of yellow television light under the bathroom door like it was a horizon she was deciding whether to swim toward. 3 seconds. 4. The typing bubble appeared, that small gray ellipsis that means someone has received you, someone is composing a response, someone on the other end of the wire is deciding what to say to you. But it wasn't Deja's avatar. It wasn't the soft purple circle with her sister's face. It was an unsaved number, a 212 area code, a contact she had never named because she had called it by mistake once, months ago, misreading a digit in poor lighting, and had never thought about again. The kind of contact that accumulates in your phone the way certain small failures accumulate in a life. Unremarked, unexamined, quietly waiting, the typing bubble vanished. The reply arrived. 5 minutes. Angela stared at the screen. The phone trembled in both her hands. No, who is this? No wrong number, sorry. No question mark hedging the commitment. Just a number, just a timeline, delivered the way someone delivers a fact they have already decided to make true. 4 characters. 5 minutes. She turned it over in her mind and could find no framework for it, no prior experience, no category. In the kitchen, Marcus changed the channel. The laugh track followed him. She sat with her back against the bathtub in the one room in the apartment that had a lock and watched the clock on her phone count down 5 minutes she was not at all certain she should be hoping for. She had stopped trusting good things a long time ago. The last good thing she had trusted had smiled at her from across a dinner table 8 years ago and gradually, methodically, quietly rearranged her life around his own convenience until she could no longer recall the precise dimensions of what had been there before. She hoped anyway. The star-bright part of her, the part that had survived everything else, hadn't learned how not to. Studio Microphone Chapter 2. The man who came. Marcus answered the door the way Marcus answered all doors. Chest expanded, jaw forward, one hand resting loosely near his hip in the preparatory posture of a man who treats every arrival as a potential territory dispute. He had that quality, the quality of a man who was always already disappointed that the world hadn't come to him first, always ready to demonstrate that it should have. Angela heard it from the bathroom. The door opening. Marcus's voice, low, territorial, slightly curious. Then silence. Then a different voice, clipped and clean and brief, that she did not recognize. Kang Minyu did not speak first. He simply looked at Marcus the way a man looks at something he has already determined the outcome of, but is extending the courtesy of a few additional seconds for the other party to reach the same conclusion. Dark coat, hands loose at his sides, expression as composed and informative as a closed door. Behind him in the hallway, one bodyguard, visible and deliberate, arms crossed, looking at a point on the wall above Marcus's head. Not at Marcus, above him. That specific placement of attention that communicates without words a precise calibration of threat. Got the wrong apartment, Marcus said. No, Minyu said. Clean, clipped, final. I don't. What happened next took 11 seconds. Angela counted them later in the weeks after, because she needed something to do with the image other than simply hold it in her hands. 11 seconds. Marcus swung first. That was always his way, first and certain. the person in every room who decided when force was appropriate and had never once been made to doubt that decision. Minyu moved the way water moves when it encounters an obstacle, not fighting the direction of energy, but redirecting it with the patient economy of something that has always known where it's going. One pivot, one controlled application of leverage. Marcus's cheek met the hardwood floor. Minyu's knee settled into the center of his back with a pressure that was precise and entirely unhurried. The pressure of a man who has done this before and found it neither exciting nor difficult. Marcus made a sound. Minyu waited without expression for the sound to finish. Where is she? And it wasn't a question. It was the last courtesy before he went and found out himself. Angela stepped out of the bathroom. She didn't plan to. She had planned to stay low, stay out of sight, let the outcome clarify itself before committing her body to any particular direction. But her feet had apparently reached a different decision, and she stood in the doorway with one hand on the frame and the cold overhead light behind her and her phone still in her hand, and her cheeks still hot and her heart moving in the irregular, urgent way of a metronome that has been knocked off its shelf. Minyu looked up from the floor. For one second, one single second that she would turn over in her memory for the next several weeks, examining it the way you examine a stone that doesn't belong to the riverbed it came from, wondering what river it belongs to, wondering how it got here. His face was not cold. There was something moving through it. Not guilt, not calculation, something older than either. Recognition, perhaps. Or the specific expression of a man who has been waiting for a moment he was not certain would arrive and is now standing inside it, required to reconcile the waiting with the having. Then his face was cold again. He stood. He did not look at Marcus. Chapter 3: The Safe House. Angela sat on a white couch that cost more than she made in 3 months at the conservatory and held the cold pack against her face and looked at the city through 40 feet of glass and thought. Someone anticipated this. The blanket folded over the armrest. The doctor who arrived without being summoned. The room at the end of the hall that Minyu would later indicate with a brief gesture, and the words "it's yours as long as you need it," phrased not as an offer but as an established fact, a thing that had already been decided before she arrived. She should have found that unsettling. She noted that she didn't. Minyu stood at the window with his hands in his pockets and his tie loosened by exactly 1 inch, the only concession he appeared to have made to the hour, to the events of the past 40 minutes, or to her. He had the quality of a man who was always at rest inside his own decisions. Angela had met people like that before, had studied the species with the wariness of someone who had learned the hard way that stillness could be either safety or danger. This was something else. A third category she was still working out the name for. "You can stay here tonight," he said, without turning from the glass. "Or longer. Don't even know you." He didn't add anything. Didn't qualify the acknowledgement or steer it toward reassurance or fill it with the eager auxiliary sentences of a man who needed her to think well of him. He simply let the truth of it stand in the room uncorrected. Angela had spent 6 years with a man who filled every silence with his own needs, his version of events, his read on the situation, his assessment of her responses, until her own voice had been crowded almost entirely out of the available space. The quality of Minyu's stillness felt, by contrast, like a room she was being handed the key to and told she could furnish as she chose. "Why did you come?" she asked, a pause that was slightly longer than accidental. "Because you asked." "I texted the wrong number." "I know," Minyu said. He turned then and looked at her directly, not assessing, not cataloging, simply present in the way that people are present when they have made a decision and are no longer in conflict about it. "But you sent it." Angela held the cold pack to her face and sat with that for a long time. Outside, the city moved through its business. Inside, something she did not yet have a name for was beginning, quietly, to rearrange itself. Chapter 4. The 5-year secret. She was still holding the program when Minyu appeared in the kitchen doorway in a white shirt with the sleeves rolled, looking like a different version of himself than the one who had arrived at her apartment door in a dark coat. Tiredness had softened something in his face. He looked like a man and not a decision. His expression shifted when he saw what she was holding. The wall did not come down, it was too well built for that, but something behind it became visible for a moment, the way you can sometimes see through a very fine screen to the room behind it. "You were there," Angela said. "I was there," he confirmed. He came to stand on the other side of the island, unhurried, not reaching for the program or attempting to redirect the conversation. "You played the Elgar, dark green dress. You tuned before everyone else. When the lights came up, you closed your eyes for a moment before the first note, just a breath, as though you were listening for something that only you could hear." Angela set the program on the marble counter very carefully. "That's alarming, Minu," he agreed, and the gentleness in it was the gentleness of a man making peace with himself rather than asking for absolution from her. "I saw you play and I could not unsee it. Every structure I had built before that evening felt like something assembled from the wrong materials. I'm not asking you to be comfortable with that. I am telling you it is the reason I have never cleared wrong numbers from my phone." Angela stood in his kitchen at 3 a.m. with a bruised face and a concert program, and looked at a man who should have frightened her considerably more than he did. The three words in the margin, she would learn later, weeks later, from Sujin, who translated them with a complete absence of commentary, were, "She plays like light." Chapter 5, the arrangement on day 3 she played. A Bach cello suite, the one she played when she needed to return to herself, when the interior landscape had been disturbed by something and needed to be walked back to its own center. She didn't know he had left the door open a precise inch on his way past. She found out later. On day 4 she emerged from the music room with the bow still in her hand and the specific brightness in her face that playing gave her. The brightness Marcus had always called showing off, had always tried to sand down into something that didn't make him feel outshone, and found Minu sitting in the dark leather chair outside the door, jacket off, cufflinks on the armrest. The look of a man who had sat down and decided to stay. "You stayed," Angela said. "Always," he said, and then the word landed between them in the way that certain words land when they carry more weight than the speaker intended to let show. He held her gaze, did not reach for the word and revise it. The choice had been made. The word had been said. A man who has chosen something does not perform uncertainty about it for the comfort of the room. Angela stood in the doorway in the amber light with the bow in her hand and looked at him looking at her, and understood that whatever arrangement had formed between them in the past 4 days had never had an expiration date attached to it. Not from his end. Possibly not from hers. Chapter 6. The Reckoning of Marcus Webb. Angela set the tablet down on the music stand beside the Dvorak. "Long have you known? Since the night you texted me," Minu said from the doorway, where he had arrived without sound, which was simply how he arrived. "I had him checked in 4 minutes. That is what took the 5th. She looked at him for a long moment. There was a version of this moment where she was supposed to feel the particular species of fear that comes from being protected by someone whose methods don't require the law's permission. She had that thought. She examined it carefully, turned it over, set it beside the prepared music room and the concert program kept in a book for 5 years, and the fact that he had asked her what she wanted to do before suggesting anything himself. The arithmetic resolved without drama. "What do you want to do?" he asked, and the question was fully and genuinely hers. No preferred answer hovering behind it, no strategy dressed as consultation. He was asking her the way you ask someone you regard as the authority on their own life. Angela folded her hands in her lap, thought about Marcus's face in the photographs, thought about what it meant to be seen all the way past the performance, past the careful management of others' perceptions, all the way down to the actual person underneath, and still keep your own face. "Want him to be seen," she said, "all the way, by everyone." The quietness of her voice was not softness. It was the opposite. It was what remains when everything else has been burned away. Chapter 7. The gala she played the Elgar cello concerto. Eyes closed before the first note. One breath. The private ritual of listening for the music before inviting it out. The hall was quiet in the particular way of a hall full of people who have money and have learned that stillness signals taste. She played it for 14 minutes. She played it for herself, and for her mother, and for the 9-year-old who had first understood, with a cello across her knee, what it felt like when the world organized itself correctly. She played it for every silence she had surrendered to someone else. While she played, Park Soo-jin moved through the back offices with two others, and a drive that would be in 4 journalists' inboxes before the final note died. Marcus's phone went off during the last movement. She saw his face from the stage, the precise collapse of a man whose architecture has just discovered its foundation was borrowed. The lawyer beside him looked at his own screen. The lawyer's hand left Marcus's shoulder. Angela held the final note 3 full beats past the written end. Then she stood and bowed and walked off stage toward the man in the shadows who had not moved. Chapter 8. The signal he kept. Minyu appeared at 7 a.m., as he always did, dressed precise, the knot of his tie exact. A man who treated mourning as a condition to be met with equal preparation rather than something that happened to you. He poured his own coffee without looking at what she was reading, without positioning himself in the story she was in, without doing any of the things that a different man would have done in order to be acknowledged as necessary to this moment. She turned on the stool to look at him. He was watching her with the expression she had first caught in the kitchen 3 weeks ago, the one she still couldn't fully translate from his particular language but had stopped needing to. She had learned to read the small vocabulary of him. This version meant, I am looking at something I do not intend to look away from, and I am not performing the looking. It's done, Angela said. Yes. City moved through its Tuesday morning behind the glass. I should find an apartment, she said, testing the word the way you test a surface you're not certain will hold your weight. Get back to proper rhythm. The conservatory's been patient, but I've been living out of a borrowed closet and I haven't. Stay, Minyu said. One word. No qualifications appended, no strategic framing, no acknowledgement that the word might need support. The single syllable of a man who had spent his entire adult life negotiating everything. Terms, outcomes, the precise language of agreements, the careful architecture of arrangements that protected all parties, and who had apparently decided, at 7 a.m. in his own kitchen with coffee going cold in his hand, that this was the one thing he would not negotiate. Angela looked at him for a long time, long enough for the city behind the glass to rearrange the angle of its morning light. Long enough for the coffee to go cold in her hands too. I texted the wrong number, she said, not an argument, not a hedge. The way you say aloud a thing you still find astonishing about the structure of your own life, wanting to hear it one more time to confirm that it is real, that it happened, that you are here because of it. You sent the right signal, Minyu said. I was the right man to receive it. The number was irrelevant. Angela Grayson set down her coffee. She looked at the city. She looked at him. She thought about wrong numbers and right signals and her mother's voice, and the star-bright thing that had refused, through everything, to go out. She thought about the music room built before she arrived, and the concert program kept for 5 years in a book, and the 4 minutes and 53 seconds it had taken someone to cross 4 blocks for a woman he had never spoken to. She thought, maybe this is what it looks like when a signal finally reaches the person it was always meant for. Okay, she said. Outside, the city went about its enormous business. Inside, Kang Minyu, who had spent 5 years attending one concert and keeping one wrong number and preparing one room for someone he had not yet earned the right to ask for, smiled for the first time in longer than he had a precise count of. It was not a large smile. It didn't need to be. The room was full enough already. It was the smile of a man who had been right to wait, and who now knew it, and who no longer had to wait alone. The end. Next, please subscribe.